Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker, background screens for your faith or volunteer organization. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, James McGarvey, Paul Buckner, and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on social media, YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, and on the all-new Church Security app.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am your host, James McGarvey, and I am joined tonight by my co-hosts, Paul and Mike. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good to be here.
Yeah, for once, nobody had any technical difficulties. So
right. Is it a day ending in Y?
Yes, it is. So anyhow, if you've never joined a broadcast, you've never heard a broadcast of ours, welcome. If you're listening at a later time through one of our other venues, you can always find our resources at churchsafetyguys.com. And you can go to our website, download past episodes, listen to past content, or you can also access it through the Church Security app, which is available at the in the Google Store or the iOS Store. Just type in Church Security, and you can download that and stream all of our past episodes. So tonight we are going to talk about church safety and security and facility management. And we talk about this topic often. And a lot of times we'll try and bring in guests to talk about just shortcoming things like, how does facility management impact security? I know a lot of churches that are smaller, safety or security and facility management kind of goes hand in hand. Like there's a lot of an overlap there with function and different things like that. And I know a lot of times that can be kind of overwhelming, especially if you're trying to separate and distinguish the two ministries. A lot of times you can have someone come up to someone that believes, or a church member come up to someone that thinks they're exclusively security and be like, hey, can you go shovel that walk for us? Can you take care of that? And I don't know. And then sometimes, it overlaps the other way too. So in most small churches, I think the position is kind of covers everything. But for those of you that don't cover everything, tonight we're diving into that topic. So any additional thoughts you guys want to add real quick?
No, I think it's good. I've never actually had the direct tie-in of formally having that role as a facilities guy. I've certainly worn that hat many times. But not as a permanent role, and it's not something that whenever possible we don't have overlapping. So
sure,
definitely see how it overlaps, and it blurs continually, much like our job blurs with being an usher. I think there's times where we wear the hat we need to wear based on the situation.
It's true. I mean, we're under probably just under 1,000 members now. And so we have a staff member that does facility stuff. And a lot of times that covers security. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I handle a lot of the security issues, but then, when no one else is available on a Sunday morning, I've been known to run around with tools, etc. So
Yep.
That happens often. So anyhow, our guest tonight is Deborah Ike, and she is with Velocity Ministry Management. So I will bring her in and we can chat with her. And she is definitely a professional in the facility, helping churches navigate the facility stuff. We'll just say stuff because she does so much. But Deborah, thanks for joining us tonight and welcome.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome. Hello.
So for those that maybe haven't heard of your ministry, or if you could just provide us a little bit of background before we jump in, that would be awesome.
Sure. So I've worked in ministry. I've worked with churches, volunteered a lot as well. And then I also have a business background and a project management background. And so the way I put it is I have a heart for ministry with a head for business. And, I know there's some controversy on can those two coincide at all, but there's a lot of principles out there that are just basically leadership principles. And there are things that we have to do in the church, like keep the finances in order. We have employees, so we have to deal with HR regulations. We need to keep the facilities well maintained and safe for our guests and for our congregation. And so there's a lot of things that an average company may have to do that honestly a church has to do as well. And so my business is the Churchoperationstoolkit, where I really try and serve the folks that serve behind the scenes. You don't really, the average person in the congregation may not know that there's someone on staff that deals with HR or deals with IT and all that kind of stuff. But goodness knows they know when things don't work, because if the HVAC busts during a Texas summer, y'all don't want to be sweating during service, right? So, that's the kind of thing that, we don't see all those unsung heroes in the background, but we know when things go awry. And so those are the folks that I try and help, because I've been in their shoes. I've worked in the finance department of a ministry, and you get the worst resources and all that kind of stuff, and yet they expect everything to work perfectly in your end. So fun times.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because I don't consider myself, like at my church, I don't consider myself a facility person. Mm-hmm. I'm 100%, I say 100% laughing, right? But 100% safety and security. And that's what I do. Mm-hmm. But because we're the first people that somebody, can easily grab when something goes down in the middle of a service, mm-hmm. a lot of times we're more accessible, and, we can jump in and fix the plumbing issue in the restroom, or do whatever we need to make things good until, Monday morning, when that happens. So it is kind of interesting to me how often a lot of that gets overlooked. But honestly, when we first started the safety and security ministry at my church, there was a lot of overlap. Like everybody just kind of assumed, well, safety means, like I mentioned before, shoveling the sidewalks, making sure that, everything's cleared. And in theory, that does to an extent. Like you're looking at, the church campus and trying to provide a safe environment so that, you're mitigating, any potential issues. But at the same time, sometimes it can get really frustrating because, those folks, if you're only training them for security type operational processes, then, mm-hmm. That can get frustrating for sure.
Well, and, they do overlap from a functional perspective a bit, because if you have, if you live in an area where there's a lot of snow and ice this time of year, and you've got icy sidewalks and people are stomping their wet boots and trying to get off before they come in, but then you don't have really great matting at the doors, then people are going to start slipping and falling at the front entrance, especially if you have tile, or linoleum or something, right? So yes, those overlap from a functional perspective. One definitely impacts the other. However, I would definitely think from a personnel perspective, whether it's staff or volunteer, you would want those functions separate so that the safety guy can focus on safety and, keeping an eye out for any weird behavior or, all that kind of stuff. Whereas, making sure the doors are locked at the proper time and all that fun stuff. But then the facilities folks, they can be ready with the mop and bucket in case the floors start getting a little bit too wet. So the one impacts the other and leads into whether safety is really happening. If there's a bunch of carpet that's ripped up and stuff and people are tripping and falling all over the place, well, that's a safety hazard. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen, unfortunately, in our society. So you have to hit both hard, from a, just making things work at your church perspective. But yeah, having those functions separate from a staffing perspective is going to be more effective, I think, whenever possible, right? But, if you're dealing with a small team, sometimes everyone has to wear about 4 hats. So
I think some of that is actually true because of the actual term safety. So for those of us that have adopted a safety team versus security team, that has blurred those lines even more. I mean, we already see it within a facility capacity. There's blurred lines between, is it facility or is it systems that are security systems like cameras and doors? Or is it, where does it fall? Where's the delineation and scope? And I think from that perspective, I think there's that blurring of that line. If we look at safety as a safety team, a lot of that is more responding to and being alert enough to prevent something like that. But if you overlap that into the safety of a facility, to your point, Deborah, a slip and a trip could cause a safety incident. So I think we're always trying to prevent an incident. We're trying to, of any capacity, whether it's a slip or trip, whether that's medical, whether that's something more threatening.
Yeah, and that goes into, preventative maintenance for a facilities manager, making sure that you are replacing mats on a consistent basis, that you are doing an occasional kind of fresh eyes look around the facility to make sure, okay, do we have any cracks in the sidewalk? Do we have chipped tiles or ripped carpet that somebody could trip on? Are the kids' areas properly baby proofed and child proofed? Are we keeping, proper signage up, and are the exit lighting, is all of that working properly so that if there is an emergency, people can quickly find the exits and evacuate? There's all that kind of stuff that we have to keep in mind. And if you don't have especially if you do have those teams separate, they have to work hand in glove really well together and communicate effectively with each other, because one's, lack of doing something is going to impact the other.
Right.
So, you can't not work together a lot. Hopefully you don't have to be one person wearing both hats, but makes communication easier. I guess you just talk to yourself. But
well, one of the interesting things on that we've done, we've just instituted, or we're working on instituting in the more recent, I don't know, last month or so, was we had an individual that in our church that was on the safety team that actually became our facilities staff member. And so there were a lot of things that he was able to take over and take off my plate, which probably, because I'm not a staff member, right? I'm just a volunteer that gets pulled into 40 plus hours a week. Yeah, just, but it was kind of nice for me, because a lot of the things that the staff probably would normally look after, like cameras, access control, different things like that, main components, that was stuff that I would do. And so when he stepped, and he saw that, so when he stepped into the role as staff member, he took that back, and he's like, look, I should be paying attention to this. I should be working with vendors. I should be doing all this stuff. And I said, okay, you know what? If you're taking something off my plate, I'm not going to complain. Right. But I kind of, like, he and I sat down and we started talking about it, and we said, well, what about, like, we always have somebody standing at a post, right, and from a security standpoint for service, and we've been trying to navigate away from always having people on their cell phones, because if you're always on your cell phone, a lot of times you're not focused on what's going on around you. And so we were kicking around ideas, and we said, well, wait a second, why don't instead of, like, asking people to always not be on their cell phone, why don't we come up with a short checklist for each post in each area? And when they're at their post, they can do kind of like a rounds type thing, but they can look at that, you know, they can check the fire extinguisher, they can check the exit signs, they can check all this stuff and write it down. And then at the end of the service, turn that in. And so then you have a recorded list of things that need repairs or things that, you know, need upkeep that the staff member can access later and say, okay, you know, this exit light was out, so I didn't notice it, even though I walked past it. But here's a new, you know, a fresh set of eyes at this post on Sunday that can take a look and see, and then give us some positive feedback. And they're doing something, and, you know, we're working together. So I do think that there's a lot of overlap, and it doesn't have to be like a frustrating situation. I know a lot of times it can be frustrating. But at the same time, I think there's workarounds for that. So I want to jump in. You had mentioned before kind of talking about how to get started with a coordinated facility maintenance type piece and security evaluation. So why don't we jump into that, and I'll let you.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would really promote is trying to do just a slow walk around your facility, outside and in. And if at all possible, bring somebody who's fairly new to the church, and maybe not, you know, totally new to the community or something, but hasn't been around for a really long time. And so they're going to see stuff that you easily overlook. Like anytime we're walking around our own homes, we forget that, oh yeah, there's that scuff on the wall where the kids threw a toy, or there's, you know, goodness knows what else, right? And so we just don't see it until we're preparing for people to come over for dinner, you know, or whatever. And we're all of a sudden going, oh my gosh, we got to fix all this stuff, right? So if you kind of take that mentality to your church facility and you walk around really carefully and look, you know, is it easy? Are all the parking lot lines visible? You know, do we need to repaint? Are there a bunch of weeds coming through cracks in the sidewalk? Are the mats working? Is the door squeaking when you open it? Is it easy to see through certain areas to find where you need to go? Is the signage obvious? You know, are there scuff marks on the walls? Are there chipped tiles? Is the lighting in the bathroom, is it all lit? You know, is there a busted light somewhere, or cracked mirrors and stuff like that? Just taking a really detailed look everywhere. Because what tends to happen is sometimes things just get neglected, especially lately. We've had COVID, you know, everyone's trying to still navigate that. People are reopening churches, but you know, sometimes you're coming back and then going back out again. And it's all been very in flux lately. And so just taking that really slow look around, making a very comprehensive list of everything you find that needs to be fixed, and then sitting down with the team, however many people you have, and prioritize. Okay, what are the biggest safety issues that we've seen? You know, what are just cosmetic things that we can need to be fixed but aren't high priority right now? But deal with the safety stuff. Deal with, you know, any potential mold that you're seeing in wet areas, in the bathrooms and stuff like that, or around the baptistry. You know, dealing with all of that. And then once you get things to a kind of a normal state where, okay, we've got everything cleaned up, we've got all these maintenance issues taken care of, then you can get into just a maintenance mode and a preventative maintenance mode, where it's, okay, once a month, we're going to check all of the fire alarms, or once a month we're going to test all the emergency exit lights, you know, or like you were mentioning, James, having people when they're standing at their post on a Sunday morning anyway, kind of a checklist that they go through to provide that information to the staff. But if you can pull all that into a central location, whether it's, you know, there's some databases out there, some online tools that you can use. I know Smart Church Solutions has eSpace out there that you can use for a lot of that stuff, like work orders and maintenance work orders and everything. If you have a central location, you can put all of that, get people working on it, and then have a schedule that's just month in and month out. This is what we check. This is what we replace, you know, the air filters, check the roof once a year, you know, whatever it is. But you go through all of that, and it just becomes part of your day-to-day routine as a team. then the chances of there being like this big issue that's going to cost a lot of money and wait and spend a lot of time is a lot lower. Like you can't prevent 100% of that. If there's a big storm in the Midwest that hail knocks part of your roof, damages part of it, well, that's partly what insurance helps out with, but you can't prevent all that, but you can do a lot that's just incremental, step by step, not going to cost a whole lot in one chunk, or take a lot of time, but can save you so much heartache and time down the road. So that's really, I'm a planner by nature. And so that is something I just think it makes everyone feel a lot more calm, more at ease when they know we're chipping away at this day by day, making sure everything's taken care of.
Sure. And I honestly, if you are a church listening and maybe you don't have full-time staff members, maybe it's just one or two people in security, you do security and you do facility stuff. I would encourage you to kind of look into any area, like if you feel underqualified to do something, then that's fine. Like obviously not everybody is going to feel skilled when it comes to HVAC and plumbing and main facility components, but there's always something that you can learn. There's always something that you can pick up. And, one of the things at our church that has always been a big challenge for us is the fire alarm system. And we do concerts, we do plays, we do drama where, like at Easter, at Christmas. Yeah, I realize that Paul's not here to come back on that pun, but,
I'm just thinking where this is going to, like Christmas Eve service with the smoke.
Well, you have that. We use, we do a resurrection scene and we have, smoke coming out of the tomb or fog coming out of the tomb to kind of create that lights and effect. And what was interesting to me is, every time we do that, of course, the fire alarm system goes off, and we've been in the middle of having the actual play where we had 1,500 people in the building and the alarm goes off. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, could we have avoided this? Could we have turned those sensors off? Could we? And nobody knew the system. And so what I did was I'm like, okay, the system can't possibly be that crazy or bad. So I went online, I Googled it, and sure enough, I found that the fire alarm system had like a 350-page PDF on how to use it. Well, our system is a very robust, I think it's Honeywell system. And so I went through page by page and I'm like tracking it down and I'm like, okay, I need to know how to shut this bell off, how to shut this alarm off, how the system really works. Because if I don't put the time in and I don't learn how to do this, no one else knows how to, how to do it. And so, what was interesting from that standpoint was I was able to do it. Like I actually figured out, okay, when I go in the system and there's a 6-step process and I made a video of it for future generations at the church. So, they can pull it up and watch it. But there was a 6-step process basically where I could go in and temporarily shut off the sanctuary so that when they do smoke, the rest of the building's not impacted by that. The strobes will still go off, but without the sound. And people usually know, okay, you know what, that's a little distracting. Can we adjust that? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But through spending a little bit of time, extra time researching that system, I was able to go from, you know what, I don't want to touch that thing because it makes me nervous and it's going to call the fire department, to, skillfully being able to navigate it and say, look, we're being prepared. We're watching for a fire. If we shut the system off, then, someone has to call 911. We're okay with that. This is how we're going to handle this type of situation. So from that standpoint, I mean, it helped us a great deal because, think about that. If you're in the middle, you have a church service that's designed to bring people in on the holiday, right? And you're trying to witness to those people and share the gospel with them. And all of a sudden in the middle of the altar call,
yeah, you don't
the
want
fire alarm goes off, that's a bit of a distraction. So
yeah, well, and there's a lot of ways to kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, make up for your own lack of expertise in different areas. I mean, for one thing, check and see if there's experts in those areas that go to your church. Like, do you have plumbers at the church who attend? Do you have, people that are experts in just handyman services and, minor repairs and all that kind of stuff? And, I've seen churches, they put together like a church beautification weekend, and they put together the list of projects. They work with some of those volunteer experts that are in their church to, figure out, okay, how do we rip up the carpet and put new stuff down in the nursery, and all that good stuff. And they get all the supplies together. Hopefully they feed the volunteers. That's always key. Provide drinks and cookies. Just trust me on this one. But then you get everyone in there, you give them their assignments, and you let them go to town and get the work done. You have people that are assigned, whether it's a volunteer that's an expert in that capacity or a staff member who leads that part of the effort. You can have team leaders dispersed throughout the area, but you can get a lot of work done on a Saturday to, spruce up the church, get some stuff fixed that's been bugging you for a while, learn a few things, and maybe you job shadow the plumber who's making some minor repairs and ask a bunch of dumb questions and get some, add to your expertise, right? But I'm sure there's a lot of stuff like that you can do. And of course, Googling manuals. I talked with someone not too long ago about new construction for a church, and he was surprised at how many churches, they don't retain all of the documentation that comes with that new build. So all of the building plans that mark where all the plumbing lines are, where all the wires are, so that if one of these days you're going to have to bust out a wall and do a remodel, well, if you already know what's behind that wall, you're not going to get any nasty surprises in the process. And keeping the manuals for the alarm system, for the fire system, for, all the little things that are around your church that you're like, oh, okay, somebody 3 staff members ago knew how that worked because they were the ones who signed the contract and bought it, but where did that stuff go?
And that's our churches. I think we've had two senior pastors in 57 years. And so, there has been a generational switch of, people volunteering to take over, and then, newer folks come up with facilities and that sort of thing. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I could tell you several stories of how, we expanded our safety office. We were expanding this, we were redoing this room, and somebody accidentally drilled into one of our sewage lines running through the building. And, the question was like, well, did you know the sewage line was there? No, we didn't. Well, why didn't you? Because you didn't look. So then it's like, okay, that's understandable. So let's look. And, in that case, it was funny because I was handed the roll of blueprints, and of course, I think I could count on one hand the number of times I've read a roll, read blueprints. So I've got them all stretched out on this table, and I'm like, okay, I don't read blueprints very often, but yes, that is a sewage line right there, and we should not have tapped into that wall.
Yeah, it seems like that would be bad.
So, but anyhow, we'll take a quick sponsor break. We'll be right back with you, so don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back.
Nobody thinks it will happen to them, but with over 2,000 emergency phone calls per month to our independent program attorney answered hotline, it's closer to home than you think. At U.S. Law Shield, we give you exclusive access to our 24/7, 365 emergency hotline, not a call center, direct access to our network of independent program attorneys. With a price point of only $10.95 per month and unlimited attorney hours for criminal and civil defense, U.S. Law Shield provides you with unparalleled service and protection where it matters most. No other program comes close. We believe an educated member is an empowered member. We do this by providing educational resources featuring seasoned attorneys, firearms instructors, law enforcement, and experts in all areas of self-defense law. We at US Law Shield believe peace of mind should come with simple and affordable protection.
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance & Associates understands that your congregation is different from a traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance & Associates, your partner in service.
We all deal with stress on a daily basis. When not properly managed, we can face burnout, mental, physical, and spiritual burnout. It can be detrimental to serving in church safety and security, as well as other ministries, and affect all areas of life. Coming Back brings biblical guidance for such a dilemma. In the book Coming Back, best-selling author James McGarvey takes a biblical-based approach to address and prevent ministry burnout. As you read Coming Back, you will easily relate to James's shared experiences, be inspired by Scripture, and grow through the practical and applicable instruction found in this much-needed book. This encouraging read will affect you and your team in a positive way to continue the path of ministry with an energized and encouraged spirit. Through biblical and practical knowledge and experience, James shows that it is all about coming back to focus on what matters, coming back to the cross.
The Church Safety Guys help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over North America through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and the all-new Church Security app. Download it today. Help us continue to reach churches by supporting our sponsors, purchasing our resources, and consider becoming a ministry partner by making a monthly or one-time donation. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this broadcast with your team. And now, back to the broadcast.
Okay, welcome back to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. So we had to take a quick sponsor break. Thanks for hanging out with us. And tonight we are actually talking about facility maintenance and safety with Deborah Ike of the Velocity Ministry Management Group. So I was going to say, Mike, I think you were going to jump in and say something, so I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, in true fashion, I'm always carrying a pen. This is my everyday carry for the show because I'm always taking notes, not only in advance, but during the show, because you don't always get to make the point, I think, when there's time. The biggest thing that kind of struck me across the board between commonality of facilities and safety is that by nature, we tend to be very reactive ministries. And so we deal with incidents when they happen. So there's a spill, there's a trip, there's a medical. The catch is pivoting our ministries to being more proactive. And I think we've hit on a couple of those points, but the idea is we have to truly continually understand that both of our ministries in that sense tend to be on the reactive side. So we have to continually repurpose them and pull them back, because the default is not going to be proactive. So it's going to be a continual muscle memory exercise to bring them to be more proactive from that sense. And I think those checklists are important, the ways that we can track some of that. I think in general, when you look at it, you say, okay, you got something that's an incident. An incident is something that needs to be fixed or something that you need to respond to if it's the case of a safety team. Some of those then bubble up to become problems. Deborah, I think you spoke about some of that, is you don't want something that could have been a $5 fix turn into a $500 repair bill because it was deferred and deferred and deferred. And I get it. We all have challenges of budget constraints and sometimes no budgets at all for certain things. And I think that's really that challenge of really understanding what you can tackle. But I think one of the other opportunities I see there across the board is that I think both ministries don't do a great job at is documenting it and keeping track of trends. And when was the last time you fixed that? And not just the manuals for the alarm system or the fire system, but literally tracking common things that are getting fixed or multiple times, because you may realize that instead of just putting bubble gum or duct tape on something 6 times, you may realize that, hey, that's now become a priority because you fixed it 6 times. And the amount of time that you're spending refixing it each time would eventually bubble up to the point of just replacing it. I think in our world, from a safety perspective, we see that with radios, is that there's a point where the battery's dead. You need to replace a battery. And I think you don't know that until you start really tracking and saying, hey, I've had a problem with this battery multiple times. Well, maybe it's time to replace. So a couple of thoughts there. Again, I think the idea of being more proactive, documenting things so that we can learn from those actions, those incidents that we're both responding to.
Yeah, I mean, something as simple as a roof, right? Well, maybe it's not that simple, but you know, I've been at a church before where they knew that the roof was leaking in a certain spot, and their standard way of dealing with it was to put a bucket there when it rained. You know, at some point, and this was not a small church without a budget. There was budget there to fix it. They were making a conscious decision to use that budget in other areas that were more forward ministry facing, right? And I understand that temptation and that desire to do that. However, at some point, you are going to hurt your ministry if people keep getting rained on in service. You know, and it also, it just looks like it communicates poor stewardship when your standard duct tape and baling wire and chewing gum approach is to put a bucket there instead of actually replacing the roof, because they patched it, they've done all that kind of stuff multiple times, and at some point that just doesn't cut it anymore. You just got to bite the bullet and replace the thing. And you know, there just wasn't a willingness to do that until it hit critical mass and they had no choice. Now at that point, who knows how many thousands of dollars they had spent in those minor repairs, when at some point you just, I mean, I know replacing a roof, especially on a commercial sized building, is not cheap. Right. But if you calculate the cost of what it would take incrementally to keep repairing it over the next 5 years, when you could just replace the whole thing, you sunk a lot of money into something that's eventually going to go away anyhow. Right. So there's just having that, you know, really intensive conversation about, okay, what are our priorities? And if we do have the budget for it, we need to invest in preventing these things from happening, from getting to that point where they are super expensive, whether that's in actual dollars or it's in somebody getting injured. And then there's an insurance claim, and then maybe there's a lawsuit after that. And, you know, so this can get pretty messy and expensive pretty fast. And so if we invest this simple time now to do these small things that aren't that complicated, that usually aren't that expensive, we can save ourselves a whole lot of heartache and mess later and save the church money. So really it's a matter of being an excellent steward of the resources you do have, regardless of how much or how little that is.
Yeah, sure. I think the prioritizing, I think the challenge is, while many of our ministries do go through exercises of prioritization, they do so in a silo. They do so within themselves, and those prioritization discussions don't occur much more broadly. And they don't start to realize that says, you know what, okay, everybody is going to make their case. Let's tie this back to business. They're going to make a business case that theirs is the most important. They're going to be the squeakiest wheel, okay? But at the same point, you have to understand that somebody's going to still have to make that tiebreaker decision, or understand that says, okay, yes, I understand that, you know what, that leaky roof may not be the most forward, may not be the most outreach driven thing, may not be, you know what, saving people. But guess what? If somebody no longer comes because they think, oh, they don't keep their building okay, well, then you've lost the opportunity altogether. What's that worth? So those prioritization discussions have to be held across ministry lines.
Well, and it's also, if that leak in the roof is in the nursery or in the kids area, like I'm a mom, I have 2 little kids. If I see that, sorry, I'm not coming back to your church. Because my kids' safety is super important to me, and any moms, any dads would be.
Sure. And, across generations, it poses a different value too. I mean, we've talked in the past about this having a different perspective of church based on your generation and your age. But the reality is most individuals that are below the age of 40 that come into a church that are looking for a new church family, church home, the typical things, I think it's number 3 on the list from Barna, is like facility. Like, is your facility safe? Is it well maintained? So for the new family, like you said, that are maybe they're trying to find a new church home, and they come in and their child is in the infant nursery and that roof is leaking, it's like, okay, so maybe that should have been taken care of before, but there's a lot of perception, and chances are that family will not be back. And there's times too. I mean, you could pull apart the idea of the roof leaking, but what happens when the roof leaks in one spot and we don't take care of it for a long period of time? That goes and damages other things, right? So there's always a trickle effect. It's never cheaper to wait on something, because at some point in time, we're going to run into a situation where, because we didn't repair it when it needed to be repaired, something else is going to get damaged, and it's going to end up being far more costly than a simple fix it would have been at that point. So,
well, I mean, I'm no car expert by any stretch, but I know when the change oil light comes on in my vehicle, I should probably take it in, because there's going to be a really big bill if there is no oil in my car keeping things working properly, right? I mean, you don't have to be an expert in that field to know if there are some warning signs. Okay, we probably need to call in an expert and have them take a look.
Well, and what always cracks me up too is, and I'm sure a lot of times if you're a smaller church and you're listening and you're like, well, I try to get my church leadership, they just don't listen. Honestly, look for partners. That's what I would say. Like, look for other people, maybe specialists in that, in the church or on the leadership team, to be able to go to the folks that make those decisions and say, look, this really needs to be changed. This needs to be addressed, because a lot of times, being able to prioritize is great, but having multiple individuals go to that leadership structure and say, this is a concern, sometimes, because sometimes church leaders honestly forget about stuff, right? Because they're busy just like everyone else is. So it's not always an intentional thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the pastor went to seminary. They don't cover roof repair and plumbing and
that's
controls and all that kind of stuff in seminary, right? And so, I mean, that's why there's a lot of these bigger churches that are getting executive pastors and church business administrators in on the mix, because they can handle those discussions and research all of that stuff. So the pastor's involved in the decision, but he doesn't have to be the subject matter expert on everything, because you just can't. It's too much for one person to deal with.
And that's like Paul always says, you don't know what you don't know, but it's true. I mean, we've had issues. We've had power surges in our building, and because of some of our wiring, when we have a power surge or when the power goes down in our neighborhood, we've had security cameras blow. We've had DVRs blow, just because they got to the point where we had duct taped them so much we could not, they were old, we couldn't fix it. Technology's always changing. And we had that happen about a year ago, and the power surged and 2 of our DVRs went, and I ended up having to go, before the church leadership. And I said, look, here's the thing. I can't duct tape this anymore. Like, I know we weren't planning this expense, but at this moment, I can't do anything else with this. And so for safety and liability and security of the church, we need to just have a capital expense of, you know what, we've got to fix this. We've got to have a professional do it.
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore. You know, I've been duct taping this system for 15 years. It's done.
Yeah.
And you know, the relationship, you know, a couple of weeks ago, Jared Teslov was on our broadcast with the church, his church in Arizona, and he was talking about relational equity. And, you know, building into relational equity, building into relationships with your church leaderships. My church leadership knows that I will always 100% do the best I can to fix what we have.
Yeah.
We do the best we can because, you know, we're stewards, right, of that stuff. So if I can put duct tape on it and make it last another year, I will do that.
Sure.
But they also respect and know that when enough's enough and I come to them and say, I can't fix this, I can't do anything, we need to just replace it, that's okay. You know what? He's being serious. We know that he does try and squeeze blood out of a turnip. So,
well, and if you also, as you're looking at making a purchase, if you look to see which option has the longest potential useful life,
sure,
you know, which is lower maintenance, so that somebody who isn't an expert on that particular piece of equipment could maintain it fairly easily. Those are different considerations to take into account when you're getting ready to replace something or look at, okay, we need a new roof, or we need, you know, to fix the electrical, or we need the new fire alarm system or whatever. If the thing that is the most whiz bang fancy, all the features, nobody can figure out how to use, much less maintain, well, then don't buy that one. Go with something that's a little bit more simple, but will still get you, you know, still achieve your goal.
Sure.
And will probably be a little bit less expensive, but you also need to set the expectation for your church leadership team of, okay, we're about to buy this. It typically lasts 5 to 7 years. So we need to go ahead and start budgeting today. I know we're just about ready to write a check. We need to start budgeting today for that expenditure, that capital expenditure that's not going to happen for maybe 7 years.
Right.
So that if you squirrel away $100 a month, you know, or whatever, you know, scale that up or down based on your church size, right? But if you squirrel away that much amount per month in a CapEx fund, when that thing is finally done and you can't squeeze any more out of that turnip, you have the money to replace it. And it's not this thing where, oh my goodness, we need to have a big special offering and we need to do a big fundraising campaign for a new whatever. You've got that set aside. And I know that's super easy for me to say, and it's a lot for especially smaller churches to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can start developing that habit and with the church culture, with your church leadership team now, it will save a lot of stress later. And I'm all about preventative anything. So.
Yeah.
I think you have a great point there, Deborah. I think the whole idea of churches looking at breaking down not just a cash flow, actually truly having a budget and breaking things into CapEx, OpEx, and looking at really understanding where they have assets in the capital expenditures that are going, hey, look, in 2023, this big nut's falling off. We'll have finally paid for it. So that's going to free up that payment. Well, are you proactively assigning that to something else? Is there something on a prioritization list that says this is the next big thing that needs to be replaced? Do you have useful life predictions on all of your big capital expenditures? Are you managing those down to the point where you don't sit there and say, okay, well, I didn't know, and you're just dealing with, oops, another thing broke, oops, another thing broke. Are you actually planning for and understanding, oh my gosh, we have this big thing coming like a roof, or we have this big thing like, you know what, that sidewalk over there, we're going to have to redo it, or there's a route going through that area of the parking lot. We're going to have to take that tree down. We're going to have to rip up that pavement. That's near the sewer line. We're going to probably have to work with the city or the state. We're going to have to come back. That turns into not a, hey, let's put a Band-Aid on it. That becomes a major project that they need to plan for, with contingencies and disruption to parking and other services. Potentially may even be, we got to turn our water off for 7 days because we have to disconnect that pipe. So all those things come into play, and it affects us on a safety side because we have to kind of plan for those contingencies, plan for those mitigations of disruption to a facility. We're going to lose that site. Well, if that happens, we now need to do a workup on another site of where we're going to hold our services from a safety perspective. So there's so much there, and I think that's where, back to the point I made earlier about that proactive, is you need to be managing your facility proactively, not managing things of when they break. You're not just a maintenance guy, you're a facility manager. Manage the assets that are under your care, not just fixing things. That's the difference.
Yeah, this is also where you communicate, or you need to communicate well with your CFO, the person who's in charge of accounting at your church, because hopefully they're managing a depreciation schedule.
Yep.
For your capital assets. You need to be working with the elders or whatever finance committee on the annual budgeting process to make sure that those things are being taken into consideration. I know a lot of times we're doing good just to rub two pennies together, but you just have to at least work on the planning there and take that into consideration so that, okay, we don't have the money today, but let's figure out how we can start saving for it.
And it's hard because, a lot of times we have the mindset we're at least from the safety perspective, we're lucky if we get a certain purchase through, right? And it happens. Like, I know several churches have reached out to us and said, we're lucky if we get an AED. We're trying to get an AED. That's a $1,500 expense. But thinking about the whole thing, well, okay, let's do some research before we buy that and say, okay, how long does the standard AED last? They have recalls and different things go wrong with them, just like everything, just like your vehicle does. So from that standpoint, and they have maintenance and upkeep, you have to replace the batteries and the pads about every 2 to 3 years. So, and those are expensive. Pads and a battery are usually right around $300. So the maintenance fee of $300 every 2 to 3 years plus, the outlay plus, okay, so how do we train? Have we budgeted for training folks on using this particular AED, because training costs something as well. So there's definitely a lot of extra components, and that's one of the reasons I was going to do a quick plug for your book here, because I have a copy. I'll show that.
Thank you.
But I picked up a copy, and it's available on Amazon, but it's the Church Event Planning Toolkit book. And one of the reasons that I really like it is because it's very simple. It breaks things down easily, and it brings up the type of thing that you would typically not think of, right? When you're trying to think through an event, or just a budget, just an operational expense, just a key piece. And we've had, again, we talk to churches all the time, but we've had several recently reach out to us and say something like that, like, hey, we just got a new AED, but we don't have resources to train. Can you help us train folks, or can you point us to where resources? And some of that is the unknown. So if you can research things ahead of time and discover stuff before that happens, then you'll be far better off from that perspective. So yeah,
it's a simple thing as a church event. Sometimes it's, do you need a permit for something where you have part of your event is outside across the street from your main building, and you want to close down that road in between so you can have people can go back and forth easily? Do you need to, does it make sense to have maybe an ambulance on standby in case someone has heat stroke?
Sure.
In the middle of a hot summer day, there's all different kind of random things that you wouldn't necessarily think of right off the bat.
We used to do tent revivals out like on our property, and Mike's seen it before, but we have a lot of grass, like a grassy knoll to the right of the property. And we would put out a tent for 8,000 to 10,000 people, like that size tent.
Oh, wow.
And then folks could come and we would preach and we'd have music and stuff. Well, the city of Columbus started regulating tents. Like, you have to have a permit to put up that size tent, even if it's on your property, because of where we are. So, that's just one of those things. Like, people didn't know, like, we were going to do it. And the city came in and said, that looks like a tent you're setting up. Guess what? Code enforcement showed up, and they're like, you need to pay $1,500 for this permit for the weekend. And all of a sudden, that was something we hadn't calculated. And we're like, 1,500 what?
Where's that coming out of the budget?
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, it's definitely been great having you on. We appreciate you taking time from your family to jump in here tonight and hang out with us.
Hopefully you guys haven't heard my kids running around downstairs. My husband's trying to corral, but you never know.
No, we regularly, I think all three of us have gone through, and I apologize for Paul. I think he had technical difficulties, so he had to bail tonight. But yeah, we all do recordings from our home. So if anything, the last year COVID has taught us that webinars are challenging with little kids sometimes.
And no one busts through the door, so I'm going to count my blessings and go with it.
For sure. Mike, did you want to say anything or wrap up anything?
I think that's good. I appreciate you've kind of covered it, and I can pray us out if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead and pray, and then we'll call it a night. So,
all right. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity that we get to do each and every week to speak with different folks that are subject matter experts, and they can bring forward information that is helpful, we hope, to the audience that is listening. We're thankful for the budgets and the resources that we do have on a regular basis. We're always hopeful for more, of course, but we ask you to open our eyes to those things around our facilities, around our duties as safety and security members, to be more proactive and less reactive. Help us see those things that we might not normally see on a regular basis. Go before us and protect us in the week ahead. In your name.
Amen. All right. Well, again, thank you for joining us and hanging out with us. As always, you can visit our website for those listening at churchsafetyguys.com and check out our resources that we have there for church safety and security teams. And then also feel free to visit Churchoperationstoolkit.com for those of you that are interested in Deborah's ministry and her books and information. She's got some great resources there on that website as well. So next week, we are actually going to have Dia Simpkins with Thomas Alexander Insurance on, and we'll be talking with her about just insuring your congregation. She's with Brotherhood Mutual, so we'll have a great discussion with her. So in the meantime, have a great week entering holiday season. So I know there's a lot of chaos going on, but we appreciate you hanging out with us. So we'll talk to you next time. Take care. God bless.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams. Join the discussion online, and for other great resources, download the Church Security app or visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and Semper Disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.